The Denver City Council unanimously approved a measure for the November ballot that would dramatically address campaign financing in civic races. The referred measure is a compromise of a citizen-led effort to reduce big money in politics. The key element includes a 9-to-1 match of donations up to $50 for candidates who do not accept special interest money. Eric, is this something that you think is going to be easier to swallow than the citizen initiative that was, I guess, inspired this referred measure?
Perhaps, although there's still a lot to this one. In fairness to City Council, they were in a situation where they either had to put on the citizen measure that had been initiated through petitions or do something with the petitioner's consent, which this is it. This strikes me as just complete evidence of the disconnect between intent, even good intent, and consequence. I mean, we have seen for the last 30 years campaign finance reform after campaign finance reform designed by people with absolute good intentions. And yet the consequences, intended, unintended, whatever, have often contributed to the ugly political campaign finance system that we now have. In Denver, where stuff like this is attractive, I mean, if we're willing to pass an initiative on rooftop gardens, my suspicion is something like this, which is superficially attractive, with all the other stuff on the ballot, as we talked earlier, voters might not dive deep into it, and it may well pass. The real issue with this, they call it the Fair Elections Fund, which is a nice bit of branding, where if you agree to play by certain rules, basically you get a 9-to-1 match. If you give $50, the city puts in $450 to that campaign. Those are tax dollars. And I think there is a legitimate First Amendment issue. If there's some issue that I passionately disagree with, why should my tax dollars be used to fund the advocacy of that issue or that candidate? I'm not on board with this measure, but it will be another topic of debate, and I would anticipate it may well pass.
Megan, Denver is usually pretty progressive and pretty generous. Are they this progressive and this generous?
I think they might be. It'll be interesting to see. There's going to be a lot in the city on the ballot this year, which does tend to push voters to vote no on everything. So that's one possibility, but Denver voters tend to vote yes on these things. So they might. And, you know, like he was saying, if you limit those campaign contributions even further, that money is going to find a way to make it to these campaigns, and that way is going to be outside of candidate campaigns where there isn't any accountability for what's being said.
Patty, you're a Denver voter. What do you think about this making the ballot?
Well, it's going to be on the ballot. The question is, will it pass through? And I think the only thing that might prevent it from passing through is that the magic mushroom legalization ballot measure is not going to be on until maybe next May. Actually, if magic mushrooms were legal, we could use the money from those sales to subsidize this. I would much prefer that to using taxpayer dollars. Denver's economy is pretty good, but it is not this good. To put this much money into it, and Eric has a good point, we're going to be subsidizing anybody, whether we agree with them or not. It is a very expensive but nice sounding program.
David, being from Boulder, we're usually expecting Boulder to provide us this kind of fodder for the CIO table. Do you think an idea like this could catch on in places like Boulder or other progressive strongholds if it has some success in Denver?
Possibly, but it's all an exercise in futility. If you dump 3 tons of cheese and nuts in the middle of the Civic Center Park, and then you say, okay, now we're going to have really strict laws to keep the mice and squirrels from coming in here. You can do your best, but it ain't going to work. And the Denver city government, for a long time, but even more so under Mayor Hancock, is this treasure trove for the mice and the squirrels, because what you invest in politics can come back to you, especially if you're a big business and powerful, with so much more of the taxpayers' money ended up in your pocket. And that's why our Colorado Constitution forbade all corporate welfare. If we got back to enforcing the text of our Constitution so that the government didn't have so much cheese to give out to the big Chamber of Commerce squirrels, we'd have less money in politics in the first place.